Surprise! Even though I'm not in the classroom, I'm still here. We are going to continue going over the notes from yesterday on dividing rational numbers. Now, I know most classes got through example of what is the value of A and they got it, but there was 2 classes that didn't, so I'm just going to go over those quickly. So when it says what is the value of A, think to yourself, A divided by what will give you -2? Well, I'm thinking that 8 divided by 4 gives me 2, so 8 divided by -4 would give me -2, so A is -4. For the got it question, they're saying that an elevator descends 1,000 feet in 8 seconds. Express the movement of the elevator as a unit rate. So I'm comparing 1,000 feet to 8 seconds. Express the movement of the elevator as a unit rate. So I would go through and divide this out. 1,000 divided by 8. 10 divided by 8 is 1. That'll give me 8. 2, bring down the 0. 8 goes into 22 times. That gives me 8 times 2 is 16. 4, bring down the 0, get 40. So I get 25. Now the answer is not 125. It is actually -125 feet per second because of this word descend. If you didn't have the negative there, then your answer would be incorrect. Okay? For the next question, for the launch, because now we're moving into topic 5-4, they are asking you to sort the tiles into 2 groups, and then we're going to need to describe each group. So, of course, you guys don't have this on your paper, so you just get to watch me do this. So the first question I see is 7.5 divided by 3, and I'm just going to throw it into group 1 because I don't know what the other tiles tell me just yet. Now that I have my second choice, which says 7.5 divided by -3, I'm looking at that and knowing that answer is going to give me a negative, and the first tile was going to give me a positive. So that sounds like it should belong in a different group. Looking at my next choice, a -7.5 divided by -3, well, the negative divided by a negative gives me a positive, so I would move that over here with the group 1. And then -7.5 divided by 3 gives me a negative, which I'll move into group 2. So what is the description of these 2 groups? This is my positive answer, and this is my negative answer. All right. Now we're just going to refresh our memory about the definition of reciprocals. The definition states that 2 numbers whose product is 1 are reciprocals. So 1/2 times 2 equals 1, because really you're putting 2 over 1 here, and that when you have half of 2, that equals 1. The new thing now is we have got the negatives, that the reciprocal of a negative number is also negative. So -2/3 times -3/2 will give us 1. So this is a key concept for today, that positive numbers, your reciprocal will be positive. Negative fractions or numbers, your reciprocal will also be negative. Moving into example 2, I will do the first one with you, and then I will have Ms. Fish pause the video and work on the next 4 questions. So they're asking you to cross out each choice that is not the reciprocal of the number. So if I'm looking at the first question, it says -7/4. And because I already stated that the reciprocal of a negative number has to also be negative, I know that I'm going to cancel out those 2 choices because they're positive. Then just double check, is 7/4 and 4/7, they appear to be reciprocals. So it tells you to cross out each choice, but I'm also going to go through and circle it just for finality there. So please pause the video and have the students work on the remaining questions. So I've gone through and I've given you the correct answers for the next 4. Be careful. I think the 5/2 and 2/5 was pretty self-explanatory. 1/8, remember, you are taking that number and writing it as 8 over 1, which is also equivalent to 8. -6 is the same thing as -6/1, which when I write it as its reciprocal will be -1/6. The trickiest one up here is the -1 2/3, which you need to first change to -5/3, and then find the reciprocal of -5/3, which will give you -3/5. Next it says, does 0 have a reciprocal? No, 0 does not have a reciprocal. Since 0 equals 0 divided by 1, the reciprocal of 0 would be 1, 0. However, you cannot divide by 0, so 0 does not have a reciprocal. Also, the product of a number and its reciprocal must be 1, but the product of 0 and any number a is 0. So there's two reasons there why 0 does not have a reciprocal. And just to remind you, this right here is undefined, so that's why we can't say that they're equivalent. Then it says dividing a number by 3 and multiplying a number by 1/3 give the same result. The same is true if 3 and 1/3 are negative. So if I've got divide by 3, 15 divided by 3 gives me 5. But if I now also decide to multiply by the reciprocal of 3, which is 15 times 1/3, I still get 5. And that should look familiar to you guys. On the next page, it says that to divide by a fraction, multiply by its reciprocal. So if we have the original problem, 7/8 divided by 3/4, the first fraction stays the same. The operation then changes to multiplication, and the second fraction becomes the reciprocal. So if the number is positive to start, the reciprocal will also be positive. If the number is negative to start, the reciprocal will also be negative. Number 3 says that circle the equivalent multiplication expression for each division expression. So they are now giving you a division expression and asking you to rewrite it as the multiplication expression. Again, we will do the first one together, or you'll just watch me do this. So negative 1/9 divided by 7/18. I know that the negative 1/9 is not going to change. So looking at my choices, I see that the second one becomes negative 9, so that cannot work. Then the division becomes multiplication, and the 7/18 just needs to be a number that when I multiply it will give me 1. So it's not 7/18 times 7/18, and it's not 7/18 times a negative 7/18, it's times 18/7. So that is the third choice there. So continue on the following 3 questions. Please pause the video. Check over your answers. Make sure that you have the correct ones written on your paper. Get your pencils in hand, and we're going to go through and do these next 2 questions. Please follow along with me, and if you feel that I've gone too fast, just ask Ms. Fish to pause the video so that you can continue writing. So they're asking us to divide 1/8 by 4/2. So I'm going to rewrite that problem as a multiplication problem. This is what you guys wanted to do so bad when we were in topic 1. So 1/8 stays the same. The division becomes multiplication. The 4/2 becomes a reciprocal of 2/4. Then double check to see if you can cross cancel, and I can with the 8 and the 2. 8 divided by 2 is 4, 2 divided by 2 is 1. Then you multiply straight across, so 1 times 1 is 1, 4 times 4 is 16, and I get 1/16. For the next question, negative 5/4 all divided by 1/4. Remember, this is your main fraction bar. So I'm going to just rewrite this problem as negative 5/4 divided by 1/4. Notice I haven't done anything with SUR yet. I know that the save inverse reciprocal, I haven't done that. I'm just rewriting it so it's horizontal instead of vertical. So now the first number stays the same, the division becomes multiplication, and the 1/4 becomes 4/1. Again, double check to see if you can cross cancel, and I can with the 4, so that leaves me with a 1 and a 1. Negative 5 times 1 will give me negative 5. 1 times 1 is 1, so your final answer is just negative 5. Turning the paper over, we're now going to look at the next one. Now we notice that we've got some negatives in here and some mixed numbers. So be careful. You want to change the mixed numbers to improper fractions first before you rewrite the problems as multiplication. So I'm going to rewrite 2 3/5 as 13/5. 5 times 2 is 13, 5 times 2 is 10, plus the 3 gives me 13. leave it as division. 2 times 10 is 20, plus the 1 gives me 21/10. Now that I have it written like that, now you will rewrite it as a multiplication problem. So the first number stays the same, 13/5 times 10/21. I'm going to cross cancel with the 10 and the 5. 10 divided by 5 is 2. 5 divided by 5 is 1. 13 times 2 gives me 26. 5 times 2 gives me, oh, excuse me, where am I? 1 times 21 gives me 21. Sorry, getting a glare here. That's an improper fraction. Don't leave your answer as an improper fraction. 21 goes into 26 one time. 1 times 21 is 21. So then 26 minus 21 gives me 5. So I get an answer of 1 and 5/21. I'm going to ask that you try this second one on your own. Please pause the video. Be careful that you don't leave off any of your negative signs. So when you convert 3 7/8 to an improper fraction, it still needs to say -31/8. So I just have the negative hanging out in the numerator. That's where I tend to put my negative sign, but you can also put it in front of the fraction like we talked before. I put the 4 over the 1 because I wanted to remind myself that when I find the reciprocal, it's now going to become -1/4. And then a negative times a negative gives me a positive. I multiply straight across, and I get 31/32. Question number 4 says that on a research expedition, 3 oceanographers in a small submarine descend 4/5 miles per hour. The equation d equals -4/5 t gives the depth d in miles of a submarine at t hours. So how long does it take the submarine to reach 2 2/3 miles below the sea level? I am noticing right off the bat they are giving me a formula, and I'm going to write that down. D equals -4/5 t. The -4/5 comes from the word descend. Okay, so we want to make sure that we know that that's with negative. They're asking you how long does it take the submarine to reach 2 2/3 miles below sea level. So if they're 2 2/3 miles below sea level, technically that is a -2 2/3, which they're showing you right there. And that would represent the distance, and that means we're looking for the time. So I'm going to take -2 2/3 and change that to an improper fraction, because I know that eventually that's what's going to happen in the question. So I'm going to get -8/3. So I'm going to substitute -8/3 in place of the d, and then have -4/5 divided by t. Now, we can solve this problem by dividing both sides by -4/5 and going on our merry way. But we need to know how to solve this in another way. Because we've been talking about that reciprocals, when you multiply reciprocals, they give you 1. Technically, when I am isolating the variable, isn't there really a 1 in front of the variable when I've isolated the variable? So I can multiply by the reciprocal of -4/5 to multiply to cancel out to give me a 1 in front of the t. So put this little note here that we're going to multiply by the reciprocal. And the question is, are we multiplying by the reciprocal of the -8/3 or by the -4/5? We're going to multiply by the reciprocal of the coefficient, the number that's attached to the variable. So I'm really going to multiply here by -5/4. Be careful that you know we're not subtracting, that is actually a negative sign. So if I do that to the right side, I need to do that to the left side. I'm going to multiply both sides by -5/4. So -4 divided by -4, that gives me -1, cancels out. And 5 divided by -5 also cancel out to give me -1. So a negative times a negative gives me a positive. So you're just left with 1t, which is the same thing as t. Then over on this side, 8 and 4, this is -8 divided by 4. So when you rewrite your answer, it's -2 divided by, -2 over there, and then 4 divided by 4 is 1. So -5 times -2 is going to give me 10, and 1 times 3 will give me 3. Then 10 thirds, 3 goes into 10 3 times. 3 times 3 is 9, 10 minus 9 is 1, so that's 3 1/3 hours to give me my time. Now I know that some of you are probably feeling very confused there, but just if you trust in the process and go back and look at this, it will not be that difficult. I'd like to pause the video so you can work on number 5. I first set up a rate here that the snow was falling 3 inches, and every 3 inches, 3/4 of an inch per hour. So I'm kind of trying to figure out my rate, that it's 3/4 of an inch. That's going in the denominator, 3 inches in my numerator. I'm rewriting it as a division problem, then rewriting it as multiplication, and then getting my final answer of 4 hours. Now, you might have set this up slightly different on your paper, but we should be arriving at the final answer of 4 hours. Number 6 is very similar to number 4. Again, they're giving us an equation, E equals -1/2 t, that describes the change in elevation, E, and miles of a hiker, T hours, after beginning her descent into a canyon. The bottom of the canyon is 1 1/3 miles below the rim of the canyon, so how long does it take the hiker to reach the bottom of the canyon? So I'm going to again start by putting E equals -1/2 t. I'm going to change 1 1/3. Now, is that technically positive 1 1/3 or negative 1 1/3? You should be saying negative because it says below the rim. So -1 1/3, again, I'm going to change that to an improper fraction, which will give me -4/3. So I'm going to substitute -4/3 in place of the E. And I want you to notice very carefully what's going to happen here. I'm leaving a space next to the -1/2. I'm leaving that as a void on purpose because I know that I have a fraction times a variable, so I need to multiply by the reciprocal of -1/2. So I'm trying to do it so that you can see these numbers right next to each other instead. So if I multiply by -2 first, I need to multiply by -2 first here. The -2 divided by 2 cancels out, and the 1 times 1 cancels out. Because I use the negative, negative times negative just leaves me with a positive t. Then over here, I can't do any cross-canceling. I have a negative times a negative, so again, that gives me +8, and 1 times 3 gives me 3. So then again, I'll have 2 2/3 hours. Okay, now I would like you to start working on the dividing rational numbers homework. If you have any questions, I can definitely go over this on Monday with you. Have a great weekend.